Hi, thanks for coming out. I'm Don Goodman-Wilson. I'm on the developer relations team at Slack. And I want to walk you through an overview of the Slack platform, which is not strictly speaking HTML, but it uses a lot of web technologies that you're going to be very familiar with. And I want to help you understand what the platform is and how you can use it in the products that you're building. But I want to begin with an overview. Our company mission is to make people's working lives simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. And this applies to everything that we do inside of Slack. We don't take an action without asking ourselves, is this in some way going to make someone's life more simpler, more pleasant, more productive? In developer relations, I'm asking this about our external developers, of course. And on the platform team more broadly, we're thinking about this in terms of our developers. And as you're building, if you're thinking about building on the Slack platform, we want you to be thinking about this too. Is the thing that you are building, whatever it may be, is it making people's working lives simpler, more pleasant, more productive? If the answer is yes, we're very excited. If the answer is no, there's probably a way to turn that into a yes, but we won't worry about that too much just now. So we live in an exciting time for work, right? We've got lots and lots of web apps and other sorts of apps and services at our fingertips that let us accomplish so many things. I don't know how many times the Google Mail logo is up there, but it's up there a lot. And all of these things are super helpful, they're super productive, but they do come at a cost, right? The tools that we use every day don't always play well together. This is where the Slack platform comes in, right? Our mission is to make it so that your experience with the apps that you use daily is better, is unified in a way that it makes it easier and less frictionful for you to take advantage of these tools, to build workflows that are smooth and seamless between all of the different kinds of tools that you use. Because we know that even a small amount of reducing the friction in these things can make a world of difference. So Slack is where apps for work together. It's the operating system for your business. That's one way of thinking about it anyway. It's the command center for teams to communicate with each other and with the tools and services that you use every day. But you all know this. We're here to talk about the platform and its features, not about Slack itself. And so I want to talk a little bit about what you can do, how you can build on it. And in particular, there are four main categories of things that you can do on the Slack platform, some of which will be of greater or lesser interest to each of you in the room. And I'd like to walk through each of these four different ways of building on the platform and do a little demo. So the first is something relatively new called Sign In with Slack. How many of you are familiar with this product? There's like 2 people in here. That's awesome, because it's an opportunity for me to teach you about it. It's really great. So you can use Slack as an identity provider for your web app or your service. So that's pretty exciting stuff. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. You can send notifications into Slack. Let me back up just a moment. How many in here are familiar with Slack or use Slack on a daily basis? Is there anybody who isn't? It's okay, there's no shame in this. Okay, so there's a few of you, that's all right. So notifications are a way to basically put information into Slack. Slack's sort of a chat app. It's where you can hang around and talk with your coworkers, right? But this is a way for your apps to talk at you as well and to enter into this conversation. Taking it another level are slash commands. Slash commands are a lot like notifications, but they're triggered by you, right? They're a one-way interaction where you ask for something, and the slash command comes back with a notification containing the response. Finally, the fourth way is bots. And we'll talk more about bots in a moment, but I don't think they need too much of an introduction. Well, let's start with Sign In with Slack. So Sign In with Slack is, in essence, this button, which is surprisingly dull considering how exciting this is. So the basic idea is that Slack is where work happens, right? This is where, as many of you in the room are familiar, this is where you go to participate and work on a daily basis. So if you're building a service or a web app designed for work, designed for enterprise, there's a reasonable expectation at this point that the customers that you want to be using your platform have a Slack account somewhere. So why bother building an account management system when you can let us do it for you? It's pretty exciting stuff. And I have a demo, because it's really, in the end, just OAuth 2. I have a cursor here somewhere. Here it is. Look, I have a little app. Here's some HTML for you. It's even HTML5, I bet. I did this in Bootstrap because I'm a back-end developer. So what this is I built a little tiny web app. It does nothing. Nobody would ever want to sign up for the service. But what it does do is it allows you to log into my service. That does nothing, so that's something, right? And this took me literally like half an hour to put together. And I'll show you a little bit about how it works, but I just want to demo it first, right? So here's the app. It's got the button. We can sign up. I think I will. Why not? What's the risk? Hey, I'm signed into 2 teams. Who knew? So we go through the usual OAuth flow. It asks me, do I want to sign into my team? I say, well, yeah, of course, I want to sign in using my demo bot team. We're going to authorize this. Looks like it's going to look at my identity and my avatar. And hello. Local tunnel crashes. If there are anybody in here who develops on this, I have some bugs to file. There we go. That's going to do something. Hey, look, it's my avatar, a generic Slack avatar. I should have set that up ahead of time with something a little more exciting in my name. And that's as far as this web app goes. But the fact remains, the web app knows my name, it knows my user ID, it knows my team ID, and it knows my avatar. You can also ask additionally for permission to view the user's email address and the user's team name, which is generally considered confidential information, which is why we make that a separate granular scope. So if you're familiar with Facebook's very similar sort of product, the structure is largely the same, except now you're not signing in consumers for a B2C app, you're signing in workers in a company on a B2B app. And I just want to go over really quickly what this looks like. That's not it. Oh, that's because I have it in RubyMine, because I write in Ruby sometimes. So as you can see, it's this, right? It's just a little bit of OAuth code here. So if you're not familiar with the OAuth dance, it's very straightforward. It starts off with a link or a button on your site that requests certain scopes, access permissions of Slack. The user clicks on that. We take them through the OAuth flow. We get their permission. We come back to you with a little code, a secret code, which is passed in somewhere here. Oh yeah, right here, with the client secret. This is the bit that we're interested in, right? It's passed in as a code. You take that along with some secret credentials that you've set up in ahead of time. You ask Slack, is this a valid code? Slack says yes, and here's a token. You can use this token to do things on behalf of the user. They're very restricted. The set of things you can do on behalf of the user is, of course, set by the scopes you ask for. But in this sort of case, it boils down to, I can find out their name, their user ID, and their team ID, and maybe a few other things that you've asked for. And theoretically, that's all you need, right? Now you've got this token. At any time, you can go back to Slack and say, is this a real user? Do they authenticate this sort of thing? Slack comes back and says, well, yes, of course they are. They're user 123. And you don't have to maintain any of this yourself. I may be unduly invested in sign-in with Slack. I think it's got a lot of potential, but that's just me. We can talk more about that later. So that's one of the 4 mechanisms that I wanted to talk about tonight. The second one, good deal more exciting, bit more visual element to it, are notifications. So notifications, again, are a way for you to push information into Slack. And one of the really great things about being able to do this is that you can have conversations around it, right? So unlike an email notification, for example, when you have a Slack notification, you can see exactly who's seeing that notification because it's going into a public channel in Slack, right? You know who's in this channel, and you can see who's responding to it because they're having a conversation about it within Slack. They're not having a private conversation in email where some people may not be getting those emails and they're feeling a little left out, or they jump in later and they're missing some of the conversation. You have the entire conversation right there. One of the other nice features about notifications, unlike regular messages within Slack, as you can see here, is we give you the option for imposing a certain amount of structure on it to make it very easy to visually parse quickly. So here's an example using Google Calendars, and it's just notifying me of a meeting coming up in 15 minutes. It tells me what the meeting is, where the meeting is, when the meeting is. It's got links to take me back to the calendar so I can see more information about what's going on. But the key takeaway here is that it's very easy to visually parse. You can see at a glance exactly what this notification means. You don't have to read the whole thing if you don't want to. Here's another example. Do any of you use Envoy in your offices or are familiar with it? So most of you aren't. So Envoy, I should say, not Envoy. Envoy? 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 We'll go with Envoy. Is this great little app you run on a tablet at the reception area, and when you have guests, they walk up to this tablet, they type in their name, their email address, maybe they sign an NDA, it takes their picture, and then lo and behold, I get a Slack notification that somebody's here to see me. It's very cool, and it's very timely, right? So this is a use case for notifications where it's just very, well, the timeliness is important. They're waiting for me at the reception area. I need to come and grab them, but also it's got, again, all the information I need to know to go recognize them. If I'd never met Alex before, I totally have, but if I hadn't met Alex before, I would know what he looks like, right? So when I go into the crowded reception area, I can pick him out. You know, I've got his full name and email address. I have a record within Slack that he came to visit me at a particular time. So the model for these is very straightforward. Just thinking about the overall server flow, Slack provides a webhook. And you make a post to that webhook containing a JSON blob that describes the message that you want posted. It really couldn't be, I don't want to say it couldn't be simpler. It could always be simpler. I'll show you. I will let the demo speak for itself. So, let's suppose then that that I want to write a little app to let me know when I need to run out of the office and catch my train. So I take BART most days. I live in the East Bay. It's kind of critical, those few minutes running down to BART, assuming it's not late or something like that, because it's another 45 minutes before I get home, right? And so I don't think BART actually has an API. So this is I can bluff this to any other crowd, but you here know better. Suppose they had an API that we could pull, right, and ask about the next train's bound for Richmond, right? We could build a notification around this. It would periodically pull this API, pull down train information, and then we can put that in a notification that would get posted in my channel right around, leaving time to let me know exactly when the next train is going to be there. So we're actually going to do that now. So I've got this demo Slack team. We've got a channel called notifications. I wonder what's going to happen here. And the way we do this is, as with all of this, you'll click on the team menu. I hope they haven't changed this lately. This happened once during a talk. The whole UI changed. We'll go to apps and integrations. Sorry, UI team, if you're watching this. Manage. No, sorry, wrong. Build. There we go. We're going to build something just for my team. I don't want to get too hung up on this distinction, but we do draw a distinction between apps, which are things that you offer for other teams to install, and custom integrations, which are things that you write just for your team, usually to bridge Slack with perhaps a bespoke system that you have, maybe a billing system or some other processing system that's unique to your company. We're just going to build this as a custom integration to keep things simple, but the two are functionally equivalent. The only question is a matter of distribution. So notifications, as I mentioned, are implemented using incoming webhooks. So we're going to make an incoming webhook. And I'm already signed into my team, so we're just going to pick the channel, and we're going to have this stuff sent to the notifications channel, because why not? And we're going to add an incoming webhooks integration. And so basically what's going to happen is we get a webhook URL. Oh, that's gonna be funky, isn't it? That's all right. Anyway, so being a URL, being a webhook, we can set, we can set all sorts of different things about this, but I'm just gonna copy and paste this, and then I'm gonna use curl. We'll come back to that in just a second. So I wanted to show you what a message looks like. Yeah, so here we have a JSON blob. It's non-trivial, but it's interesting. And I've tried to structure this notification to be potentially useful for the use case that I described. And so we give it a username, we give it a little emoji, it's got some text, the next homebound trains, and it's got these three things called attachments. Now don't confuse attachments with like email attachments. Attachments are an interesting way to structure a Slack message. that break the message up into blocks, like we've seen in some of these things before. And we're going to create an attachment block for each of the next 3 hypothetical trains that are going to show up. So we go here, and I need to replace this webhook URL with the current one. I've already got this all ready to go, and we're just going to hit the webhook with curl and come back to our team. And there's our message, right? So there's the formatting I was talking about. So the first train, I've got it colored red to let me know I've got to run if I really want to make that one. I can't get to the BART station from our office in 3 minutes. That's ridiculous. So I'll look at the 8-minute one, which is color-coded yellow, and so on and so forth. So in the next session, Brenda's going to talk a great deal more about notifications and some really cool use cases and how to build these out in more detail because you're not building with curl. And it's going to be fun and exciting.
Where did you specify the colors?
Yeah, so I'll just go back to that real quick. So each of these attachments has a color field. That sets the color in the sidebar. There are a couple of different image options, yes. Yeah, so there are a lot of options for this. We've only got a couple minutes to go through the demo. But yeah, there are a lot of different things you can do to structure these messages, but the options like HTML 1 and 2 back in the day, it's structured rather than presentational. We worry about the presentation, you worry about the right structure for it. Demo 2. All right, so some tips and tricks. Format your response. Use these attachments. Use some of the other structures that we give you to both put the bits of your notification in spatial order and to give them some color, to make them primarily easy to visually digest quickly, right? You don't want to put up a wall of text for your users because if you do that, they're not going to read it, I promise you. Make it easy to read. Whoops. Digest, don't spam, so it's very tempting if you have like some sort of web service that's generating lots and lots of events to generate lots and lots of notifications. The moment you do that, you disengage with your users. If there's a fire hose of events coming in, they're not going to read them. So think about digesting these intelligently, right? So maybe it's just a summary of what's happened. Maybe you can provide an analysis of the last several events. But think about the risk of disengaging with your user. Finally, we're Slack, we love emojis. Emojis are an incredibly dense visual language, right? They're really good for, again, producing notifications that are easy to visually digest very quickly, right? Sometimes they can be obscure, I guess, but oftentimes you can get the point across with a very simple emoji. I didn't use them in my example, but they're quite popular. So that's notifications, that's 2. Let's talk about slash commands. So here's an example slash command. That's a lot of fun. It's for Foursquare. So the Foursquare slash command is slash Foursquare. So you type that in, and whatever follows that slash command is going to get sent off to Foursquare's app to be processed. So in this case, what's happening is Foursquare is going to process this as a search query. So for some reason, we're looking for business lunches in Miami, or a place to have business lunch in Miami. Lord knows why. And Foursquare comes back with a couple of potential options for us, right? So here's some images like you were asking about. Here's some great use of color, right? They've used their branding to color these responses. And they give the title. There's a link where we can go to Foursquare and see more detail about it. There's a little tiny image there to entice you to actually consider that restaurant and that sort of thing, right? The key to slash commands is that they're one-off sort of interaction. So it's easy to think about slash commands as being like a command line utility, and that's certainly one use for them, right? With a bash command line, you type something in, something archaic, perhaps only you understand, and you get back a response immediately. And maybe that response is, here's what you were looking for. Maybe that response is, you typed that in wrong. But I encourage you to think about slash commands in a much more expansive way. There need not be a rigid syntax. There need not be unforgiving error messages. And this is part of the reason I like the Foursquare example, because it's a search query, right? There are several other great examples of slash commands out there that perform queries using, if not English language, something approximating English language. Think Infocom text adventure, right? That level. Yeah,
Are slash commands specific to the channel you're on, or are they global?
they're global.
So you must have a limitation on how many people can register.
No? Oh, sorry. The question was, are slash commands tied to a channel or are they global? And the answer is that they're global. And no, there's no restriction on the number. Well, if you're on the free team, we limit you to 10 apps installed, full stop. But all those might have slash commands. But there's no inherent limitation. You do need to think about, and I'll come back to this in a moment, what you name your slash command. Because namespace collisions are a bit of an issue we're still working through. The server flow for this is only slightly less straightforward than with a notification, right? In this case, you provide the webhook. And when a user invokes the slash command, we will hit your webhook, and then you send a response, and that response is just like the notifications, right? So you can post a notification in response to this just like with a notification. And guess what? We're going to build one. So now we have a slash commands channel. And this slash command is going to be a little hokier. We're just going to make this up for the purposes of demonstration. What if we had a slash command where we type slash command and some string, and it just echoes back to us what we typed in, right? This is like the basic hello world of slash commands. Well, again, the first thing we need to do is set it up. So we're going to go up here to Slack bot demos, apps and integrations. Maybe move this over so you can see it. We're going to go to build again, and we're going to go to make a custom integration again. This time we're going to build a slash command. Now we need to think a little more. There are a few options here that we didn't have before. So the first is we need to name it. What should we name it? Because I don't want to name it slash echo again. What? Ditto. Okay, that's good. We're going to call it slash ditto. And we're going to hit add slash command. All right, so we need to pay attention to a few things. First of all, we need to decide where our webhook is. And as it happens, I have a webhook all set up for this right there. You can choose post or get. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to choose get, but you can do it either way. And I'm going to ignore this bit right now, but I'm going to point it out because it's super important. It's a token. We are asking you to put a webhook out there in the wild, where anybody can call it. Now, ideally, they won't be able to discover it. They won't be able to discover it. But in case they do, we have this token field. And it's a very simple verification. Basically, it's a shared secret between you and Slack. And anytime we hit your webhook, we will include this token. So just make sure this token is in the parameters, the get parameters of the post data, when it comes in, and then you'll know it's from us, assuming you didn't share the token on GitHub or Twitter, which happens sometimes. So it needs a good name. I don't know. What do we call it? Someone name this bot. Because I'm going to name it Repeat After Me Bot.
Howdy bot.
Howdy Bot. Well, that's technically taken, but whatever. Ben Brown, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. And we can pick an icon for it. We're going to pick an emoji, more or less at random. Okay, woman, perfect. And we can give it a little autocomplete. So this is one of the nice things about slash commands. It's not really autocomplete, but it's kind of like autocomplete. So as the user begins to type a slash command, we can offer suggestions based on what they've typed so far. And for your slash command, you can provide a little helpful text, right? So we're just going to give this something easy. What you say, usage hint is going to be like text to echo. Oh, no, that's not how you spell echo. Text to ditto, because it's called ditto. And we're going to save this integration. Now, as it happens, this is running somewhere. Please work. Ha! It did work. Oh, but it didn't echo what we said, did it? That's deliberate. All right. So this is written in PHP because we're a lamp stack house at Slack, so why not? And it's just a little bit of PHP that just pulls in the get parameters and it constructs a response using the same sort of format we did before. And look at that, it just says, hi there, username. That's no good. So let's do this. So the text of the slash command is sent in the parameter text, so we can just concatenate this in, right? Like that. And if my SSHFS connection is working, that should be all there is to it. What? Oh, this is PHP, isn't it? You're a sharp crowd. We're going to assume that there we go. Maybe that will work this time. Yes, that looks like now we're properly connected over SSHFS. Now we have to type all this again. $, MESG, because PHP. Nah, we're doing much better now. It's working. So that's a slash command in a nutshell. So, thinking about slash commands, there's a few things to think about. First of all, we expect a response within some ungodly short period of time. I forget the number. Is it 200 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds, something along those lines. We expect a 200 OK response back. If we don't hear back from you, we assume something has gone wrong, and then the user sees a terrible, terrible error. So if you're not ready within the 200 or 300 millisecond window, that's fine. Just respond with an empty response in 200 OK. We give you a URL. It's a webhook URL, just like with notifications. You have up to 30 minutes, and you can call it up to 5 times. Right? So this is great for if what you're going to do is going to take more than 200 milliseconds to hash out. And because you can use it up to 5 times, you can even use this to send status updates. Right? If it's a really long-running process, like you're deploying or you're running something on Travis CI, right, and it's like a 30-minute window for that to happen, you can send status updates to keep the users up to date with what's going on. Naming is super important, as I mentioned before. It's super important for a variety of reasons. One, you get undefined behavior if there are 2 slash commands with the same name. I only say it's undefined because we're not entirely sure exactly how that plays out. It turns out I say one thing and then I see evidence that it's the other way around, and then so we're just going to call that undefined. So avoid really common names, right? Simple, broad verbs like /print or /run. You're going to run into a namespace collision. But consider brand names like the Foursquare / command, right? Because then you're definitely not going to run into almost certainly not going to run into a collision. Yeah?
Is there a limit in terms of the length of the slash command?
I don't think that there is. There might be. Now I'm suddenly very curious. I don't know. It's possible, but your users are going to get sick of it long before we hit whatever that limit is.
But it's either that or start having naming collisions.
Well, so possibly. So you might consider, I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to say it anyway. You might consider namespacing them if it's something internal to your company, for example, prefixing your slash commands with like some initials that represent your company. Kind of like with Objective-C class naming or something like that. You could do that. I wouldn't recommend that for a product that you want to distribute widely. For that sort of thing, I would rely on something like a brand name, like the Foursquare thing. This seems to be the most popular way forward as an insurance against not domain name collisions, but slash command collisions. Anyway, it's something you need to think about. Finally, think about linking user profiles. So sign in with Slack is a mechanism for this, but the general idea is you're probably connecting this up with a service somewhere where you already have a notion of a user account, and of course Slack has a notion of a user account, and you may need to bridge these two things, right, in order for the slash command to be successful. So taking Lyft, for example. Lyft has a slash command. You can order a car from your office to home using a slash command in Lyft. How does Lyft know to charge your credit card and that it's your account? Well, they ask you, right? They send you a link, and you click on that link, and it has your user ID and your team ID as parameters, and so then you go sign into Lyft, and they can link these two things together. Sign in with Slack is another mechanism that you can use, as I said, to ensure this linking. So all these things are possible, but it's certainly a consideration you need to keep in mind when building these things. So now let's talk about bot users, because why not? Bots. Woo, woo. Bot users are fun. They take the level of interaction to a much greater degree. So with slash commands, it was somebody invokes a slash command, the slash command responds, that's the end of it, right? Bots, it's much more freeform, much more open. They behave just like users in Slack, right? We treat bot users just like regular users. They connect using the same mechanisms that the clients connect with. They get their own profile, their own user ID. They appear just like a user in every respect in Slack. And so here's an example. This is why I said Howdy was maybe not the best name for what we were doing, because there's a bot named Howdy, made by a company called Howdy. And Howdy runs stand-up meetings. And so we have a little example dialogue here. CC is asking Howdy bot to run a stand-up meeting. Howdy asks, what sort of meeting do you want to run? CC selects a particular meeting, and Howdy says, I've started the check-in. What's not on the screen here is then Howdy then goes and sends a DM to each of these person, a direct message, and asks them, can you tell me what you've been doing for the last day? Can you tell me what you're going to do the next day? It collects these responses, puts them together into a report, and when they're all in, or if a deadline passes, Howdy then goes back to CC with the collated report of what everybody's been doing. Or maybe not just to CC, maybe it puts it in a public channel where everybody can see it, right? So bots have a lot of advantages because they open up the door to natural language interactions. And they also open up the door to multi-step interactions. So there's a lot of excitement around bots, and I think it's very highly justified. Bots are actually considerably more difficult to write than other forms of interactions. We can't do this just with a couple of webhooks here and there. Instead, we have a particular API endpoint that your bot user will call to initiate a connection, and it's going to send back a URL to a WebSocket that needs to be opened. You need to connect to that WebSocket, and then you need to hold that WebSocket open. Right, and that WebSocket represents the bot user's connection to Slack as a service. This is exactly how our clients operate, and it's exactly how bots operate. Like I said, there's almost literally no difference between the two. So, let's build a bot. I cheated a little bit. We have a bot already. Because they're very difficult to, well, they're not very difficult. I don't want to say they're very difficult, because they're comparatively difficult to set up and get running, especially within the constraints of the time we have here. It takes about a couple of hours. It's not bad. I've got one going already, and it's running on a service called Beep Boop. Beep Boop is a tremendously good bot hosting service, and we'll see a little bit of that in a moment, but I'm going to begin by inviting our bot into this channel. Bots are like vampires, if you've ever seen Buffy. They have to be invited in. And this is a key security principle, right? If the bot's not in the channel, you know that you're not leaking anything to the bot for it to listen in on. And so I've got this little bot programmed. It's very straightforward. It does two things. When it gets invited into a channel, it says, I'm here. And when we say, it's not at hello, it's going to be, there we go. If we tell the bot hello, it says hello back. And that's pretty dull. We can do better. And indeed, here's what the code for this looks like. So this bot is built on a framework called BotKit, which is a Node.js framework for building bots. It's pretty cool. It's very easy to use. There's some great boilerplate code out there. One that we host is called Easy Peasy Bot. You can just fork and build a bot. And the key part of the bot is this snippet of Node.js code here. And it says, when the bot hears hello, and that hello shows up in the form of either a direct message with the bot, that's a private conversation with the bot, or the bot is mentioned somewhere in the message, so it's like hello at Easy Peasy Bot, right? That's a mention. Or if it has a direct mention, which is a distinction BotKit makes, which is to say the message begins with an at mention, right? So you're not just mentioning the bot, you're actually talking to the bot directly. Then we reply, hello. Well, it's very easy to make our bot multilingual, since we have a theme here. We can make it respond to howdy too. And it can say hello back. So, somewhere, yes, I have a GitHub project, and we're just going to commit directly to master because we like to live dangerously when giving a demo. Yeah, here it is. So here's the core of the bot. We're just going to replace its brain directly in production. We're going to commit the changes, and then the beep boop bot is going to detect those changes, and this is in the beep boop Slack, and this is from the beep boop bot. Sorry, I'm not saying that to y'all. It's going to send us status notifications as this bot gets pulled, built, stuffed in a Docker container, and deployed out into production. And indeed, we're done. And so now, this should work if we say howdy. Yes, it comes back and says hello. This is the first time all 4 of my demos have run at once. Pat myself on the back there. So that's a bot.
Do you know for human users, there's an option to have the real name rather than the username displayed. Is it possible to have the real name of the bot? The bot has a name and a username. Is it possible to display the real name? Like, could you have easy peasy bot without the hyphens and capitalized spaces?
Right, so he's asking about usernames and real names in Slack. I think the team, so it's first and foremost, it's a team preference whether or not to force display one or the other. And then I think there's a personal preference as to what you want displayed. I think I just have it set to the defaults, which are the at names, the usernames, but of course bots have real names as well. And you can display them by their real name, yeah. So some tips and tricks. So interacting with bots is an opaque process, right? Unlike a UI, there aren't a whole lot of affordances with a bot for you to go and say, oh, well, there's a text field for me to type in, and there's a button I can click. We do have buttons, though. That's new. So let me back that up just a little bit. So provide feedback and help, right? Help your users figure out how to navigate your bot. Don't let them get stuck in a situation, because this is very, very easy to do, where they're just going in an infinite loop, right? They're having a terrible conversation. It's a death spiral. They're getting pissed off, right? And the next thing you know, they're screenshotting it and posting it to Twitter. That's terrible. Don't let that happen. Find some way, whatever that may be, and we're still working on best practices here, to help your users figure out how to use your bot successfully. Because if they're not successful in using your bot, they won't use it more than once, right? 2, this has to be said, don't DM everybody. So an anti-pattern is when a bot is first installed, it DMs everybody on the team because discoverability. Except everybody on the team hates it. Also, nobody on the team knows what that bot is or why it was installed or what it has to do with them. Just don't do it. Instead, we do encourage you to DM the person who installed the bot, right? So whoever installed the bot, feel free to have a conversation with them. And indeed, mention to them best practices around using your bot, give them a little tutorial on using the bot, encourage them to invite the bot into other channels where the bot is going to be helpful and useful, and other people can discover it and interact with it there. And this also falls under the category of thoughtful onboarding too, right? This is a great opportunity when it's first installed to onboard, but do so in a way that encourages people to engage and use the bot in the way that's most productive. Yeah? Can a bot call a slash command? The answer is no. Unfortunately not. But, hey, Giphy has an API. You can call that. So most cases where you think a bot should be or ought to be able to call a slash command, usually there's some other way to achieve it. So it's not a real loss. Yeah?
Is it possible to basically make your bot omnipresent and be available in all of your public channels in your team?
Not automatically, no. It needs to be invited by a user. The default access policy is that the bot is in no channels, and that you have control over what channels they get invited to. There are ways around that. So those are the 4 main ways to build on Slack. Sign in with Slack, notifications, slash commands, and bots. So now that you've built this great thing, whatever it is, you'd like to get it out there. And our main mechanism for distribution right now of apps, because apps are the form of Slack integration that you distribute to other teams, is through our Slack app directory. That's at slack.com/apps. You can't see it on the screen. There'll be a link at the end. Right now we have over, my slide says 350, but that's false. I think we're over 500 apps now in the Slack app directory since we launched in December. They include many that you likely already use today. Trello just released one that's really, really awesome. They're building Slack first, right? They're treating Slack as being on an equal footing to their web clients and their mobile clients, and the results are, well, I'm surprised. It's really, really nice. Also, of course, Dropbox, Google Calendar, GitHub, lots of things like that. And there are also lots of new apps that are being built Slack first as well, right? Where Slack is the primary mode of interfacing with these apps. I encourage you to go here, have a look, explore. Yes?
What does the approval process look like for apps?
I'm glad you asked. We'll get to that in just a second. And of course, if you're too lazy to leave Slack and go to the website, we have a slash command, /apps in a search term, and it will return the top 3 results from our app directory. We hope to be doing more with this in the future. And of course, it's got links directly to the entries in the app directory itself. So when thinking about building an app that you want to distribute over our app directory, now to answer your question, here are some of the top things that we strongly encourage you to do. And we do have a website with a checklist. And so you can see exactly the things that we're going to be looking at specifically. Almost all of the requirements are editorial in nature, right? We're concerned more about you building an app that's easy to use, that's going to get traction, and that indeed makes people's working life simpler, more pleasant, more productive. So the first is minimal scopes, right? So I mentioned earlier that we use OAuth in a number of places. When you're building an app, we use OAuth. We have a wide range of scopes that you can request for your app. Select those scopes that are appropriate for your app and no more, because if you select too many, they seem suspect, users aren't going to install it. We've gotten that feedback over and over again, and we've seen it with apps that ask too much. And so if you feel like you're asking too much, see if there's not another way you can do it that requires less scope to accomplish the same thing. 2, a thoughtful description is really helpful. So on the Slack app directory, it works a lot like the iOS app store. You get a section on the screen for text description. So think very carefully about that, what description offers, because it's the first contact that users will have with your app in depth. It's your first chance to sell it. It's also your first chance to lose the customer. So think carefully about that. And finally, an amazing install page is really important as well, right? So when they click on the install link, we actually redirect them onto your website, where you now have a chance, using your full HTML5 superpowers, which I'm sure most of you in here have. I don't, that's why I use Bootstrap, to really sell it, right? Do whatever you think needs doing to really bring home the need for the user to install the app, right? It's your second and also last chance to convince the user, and we try to give you the tools to do that by taking them back to your website. So, again, we want you to join us as we build the future of work together, right? We're committed to our platform, and we see it as a positive, virtuous cycle. The greater the opportunity for Slack, the greater the opportunity for our app developers, and more importantly, the more our app developers build on our platform, the bigger the opportunity is for us, and it just continues around in this cycle, right? We are building this out because we know we can make the pie bigger, and we very, very much want to share that with you, right? If we were doing this on our own, it would be over already. So we want to work very closely with you. We're not going to just shut the door in your face. We're going to hold your hand every step of the way to make sure that whatever it is that you're building on the Slack platform is going to be successful, because your success is our success, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you ever find like the app submission process is not transparent enough, we'll do what we can, right, to make that even more transparent. So now you may be asking yourself, how do I get started? Well, funny you should ask. We have several great websites and resources for this. Slack.com/developers is our landing page for people interested in getting started in the Slack platform. API.slack.com is our API reference website. We've got tutorials, we've got references, sample code, the checklist for submitting an app. The Slack Platform News app is an app in the app directory that you can download and install in your team. We don't do mailing lists. We do Slack lists, and so this is your way of subscribing to the platform Slack list, I guess. And of course, coming to talks like these, this is a great opportunity. So the last thing I want to mention real quick is we have $80 million burning a hole in our pocket, set up specifically to support you in building these apps. We've already announced 3 companies that we funded with this money. We will be doing more fundings, and we'll be announcing more fundings. This money is not here so I can put a big number with lots of zeros on a slide. It's here to give away, right? Slack fund at slack.com if you're interested in submitting whatever it is you're building on for consideration to the Slack fund. And I can give you a few more details about the way this works after the talk if you have questions. So that's what I have. Thank you.